The man who once abandoned me now wants to rekindle our relationship. His current wife came to my door, calling me shameless. Hilarious. My eldest daughter is a brilliant lawyer who's never lost a case, and my youngest son is a genius who got into Harvard on a full scholarship. And me? I'm rejecting his advances. I'm the richest woman in the state. You can't afford me. Yes, I understand. I'll be right there. I hung up the phone, frowning. My son Ethan's homeroom teacher had just called, saying there was an incident at school that required my immediate attention. She wouldn't elaborate over the phone. I grabbed my car keys and drove straight to the school, my mind racing with possibilities. When I pushed open the door to the teacher's office, I found Ethan leaning against a desk with his arms crossed, irritation written all over his handsome face. Two girls stood nearby, one maintaining perfect composure, the other crying dramatically with her head down. Mrs. Patterson, the homeroom teacher, sat on a nearby chair, looking thoroughly overwhelmed. Seeing me arrive, she seemed relieved and gestured for me to sit on the couch while we waited for the other parents. Looking at this scene, I could pretty much guess what had happened. Teenage drama, it was always the same story. What surprised me was that it involved Ethan. Early romance could happen to anyone, but my son? That was genuinely shocking. I knew my own child. Ethan had inherited my looks. That face of his was so striking that talent scouts used to chase us down 3 blocks when he was younger. Women of all ages would turn their heads when we walked by. But despite that gorgeous face, he was completely clueless about romance. Painfully, obliviously clueless. I'd actually hoped he'd experience some normal teenage feelings, but reality had other plans. At 5, he made the neighbor girl cry. At 7, he annoyed his seatmates so much she transferred classes. At 12, he frustrated a young female teacher into quitting. This kid was hopeless when it came to emotional intelligence. I glanced at the 2 girls. I recognized the composed one. She was Ethan's desk partner, Sophia. Smart girl, good grades, though her family struggled financially. The crying girl, however, looked familiar in a way that made me uncomfortable. I was certain I'd never seen her in Ethan's class before, yet her face triggered some distant, unpleasant memory. Just as I was trying to place where I'd seen that face, someone knocked on the door. Mrs. Patterson immediately stood up. "You must be Bella's father. I'm her homeroom teacher. Thank you for coming." A man's deep voice responded, and I looked up curiously to see who commanded such deference from the teacher. When I saw that familiar face, I froze. After 18 years, I never thought I'd see him again. For a moment, I thought I'd forgotten everything about the past. I was wrong. I shot up from my chair, barely restraining myself from unleashing 18 years of suppressed anger. The man, Michael Harrison, seemed equally shocked. His composed expression cracked as he stared at me with complete disbelief. I had been such a fool when I was young. A complete romantic fool. In high school, I gave up my chance at an Ivy League education to follow this man to a mediocre state college. After graduation, I abandoned my plans for law school to support his dream of becoming a government official, taking a factory job to pay his bills. I was so naive, so completely under his spell. He promised that once he landed his government position, we'd get married. But after 3 years of me supporting him financially, he turned around and told me that a factory girl wasn't good enough for him. All those sweet words had just been tools to use me. Being with me disgusted him, he said. I was the most pathetic woman he'd ever met, throwing myself at him like that. That's when I finally woke up and saw him for what he really was. But Michael Harrison had left me with more than just a broken heart. He'd left me pregnant. When I discovered I was expecting, I almost terminated the pregnancy. But standing outside the clinic, I changed my mind. That child was Ethan. I raised Ethan alone for 18 years, never telling him who his father was. In my mind, Michael Harrison was dead, and I was determined to keep it that way. "Grace, are you all right?" Mrs. Patterson asked, noticing my hostile expression. I forced myself to sit back down, suppressing my rage. Michael, beyond his initial shock, didn't react much. He pulled up a chair about 3 feet away from me. 18 years had changed him. He looked more distinguished now, with an air of authority. But behind those wire-rimmed glasses, his eyes kept darting toward me. Once the final parent arrived, Mrs. Patterson cleared her throat and began explaining the situation. "I've called you all here to discuss an issue regarding teenage relationships among your children." She hesitantly explained what had happened. The class was rearranging seats based on grades, and Michael's daughter Bella was assigned to sit next to Ethan. But Ethan refused and wouldn't let Sophia change seats either. Feeling rejected, Bella had dramatically confessed her feelings to Ethan in front of the entire class, demanding to know if he liked Sophia. Apparently annoyed by the scene, Ethan had simply said yes, confirming her suspicions. The whole thing might have blown over, except the principal happened to witness it during his rounds. With the school's current crackdown on student relationships, and Ethan being in the honors class, the principal took it very seriously. I was speechless. What a ridiculous situation. I glanced at Ethan, then at Michael, who was frowning deeply. Looking between Michael and his dramatically weeping daughter, I thought they both seemed to lack common sense. "The school takes this very seriously, Mrs. Patterson continued. "These are seniors who should be focused on college applications. I'm asking all of you to have serious conversations with your children about prioritizing their studies." I nodded along, though I wasn't really listening. How could I lecture Ethan about avoiding teenage romance when I'd been the poster child for making bad romantic decisions? There was no way I'd ever tell him about my past mistakes, about how I'd thrown away my future for a man who abandoned me while I was pregnant. "I know my own daughter," Michael suddenly spoke up, his voice cold. "If the boy hadn't manipulated her somehow, she never would have fallen for someone like him." "What did you just say?" I immediately snapped, glaring at him. "Mr. Harrison, please be clear about the facts. Your daughter was the one who publicly confessed and pursued my son, not the other way around. Don't project your own twisted mindset onto a child. Public pursuit like that shows poor judgment and bad parenting. Your daughter needs better guidance at home. This has nothing to do with my son." Michael's face darkened, but I was just getting started. All those years of suppressed anger were finally bubbling to the surface. Looking at him and his daughter, who appeared to be the same age as Ethan, a terrible realization began to form. "Like mother, like daughter, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree," Michael said coldly. He stood up, and I was about to respond when Ethan suddenly lunged forward, grabbing Michael by the collar. "Say that about my mother again. I dare you," Ethan snarled, his face fierce. At 18, he was strong and athletic. Michael couldn't break free from his grip. "Let go of me. You're finished. You know that? Your future is over. Try me." I was terrified, but not for the reason you might think. I'd have loved to see Ethan punch Michael, but I couldn't let that happen. From Mrs. Patterson's deferential attitude toward Michael, and rumors about a new bureau chief with the last name Harrison, I'd figured out that Michael now held significant political power. Given his vindictive nature, I was afraid he'd sabotage Ethan's Harvard scholarship if things escalated. "Ethan, are you insane?" I pulled him away from Michael. "Do you want to give up Harvard?" I held on to Ethan firmly, afraid he might lunge again, then turned to face Michael with my chin raised defiantly. "You're right about one thing, like mother, like son. My son won a gold medal in the National Math Olympics and earned a full scholarship to Harvard. He gets that from me. As for you trying to ruin my son's future, dream on. Touch one hair on his head, and you'll regret it." With that, I grabbed Ethan and walked out. Since Ethan had already been accepted to Harvard, he didn't technically need to stay in school. The only reason he'd continued attending was because the school wanted to boost their college admission statistics. After this incident, I definitely wasn't letting him stay in the same class as Michael's daughter, and I refused to let him get dragged into the mess of my past. But as we reached the school gates, I stopped walking. Wait. There was something important I'd been overlooking this entire time. I turned to face Ethan with disbelief. Son, be honest with me. Do you actually have feelings for Sophia? Ethan seemed surprised by my sudden question. He probably thought I'd let it slide. He blinked, and though he tried to hide it, I caught the telltale sign. His ears turned bright red. After a long pause, he finally spoke. Mom, Sophia is a really good person. I knew it! But you're going to Harvard, and with Sophia's grades, she'll be lucky to get into a decent state school. Have you thought about the future? I was nervous asking this question. I was terrified that Ethan had inherited my tendency to sacrifice everything for love, but I'd worried for nothing. Without hesitation, Ethan gave me a confident smile. That's why I've been helping her study. We're going to Harvard together. What if she doesn't get in? She will, he said firmly. Sophia is smart and hardworking. His face took on that soft reddish glow again as he spoke about her. I felt a strange mix of pride and heartache watching him. This was what real love looked like, working to become better together, not sacrificing your future for someone else. What I'd thought was love all those years ago was just pathetic self-destruction. I was relieved that Ethan hadn't repeated my mistakes. Do whatever you want, I said, ruffling his hair. But if you don't win her over, don't come crying to me. I decided to let Ethan continue attending school normally, but I warned him to stay away from Bella Harrison. I'd never tell him the truth about their relationship, that they were half-siblings. Fortunately, Bella looked just like Michael, while Ethan was practically my clone. There was no resemblance between them and their father. I thought this would be the end of it, that life would return to normal. I was naive. A few days later, as I was leaving my neighborhood, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked outside. Our area was mostly elderly residents, so a new luxury sedan stood out immediately. I was about to get into my own car when I heard a familiar voice call my name. Grace. Hearing that voice made me consider which nearby locations didn't have security cameras. I turned around coldly to see Michael getting out of his car, dressed in an expensive suit. The sight of him filled me with disgust. The phrase, abuse of power, immediately came to mind. He approached quickly, but I held up my hand to stop him from coming any closer. What? Here to settle the score? My voice dripped with contempt. Seeing his face brought back all those awful memories like a slideshow of trauma. How have you been all these years? Michael asked, putting on what he probably thought was a caring expression. How disgusting. I didn't respond. How I'd been was none of his business. Every day without him in it had been a good day. Grace, Ethan is my son, isn't he? The moment those words left his mouth, my expression turned ice cold. Michael Harrison, keep your disgusting thoughts to yourself. Ethan has nothing to do with you. If you don't have anything important to say, get out of my sight. My son and I find you revolting. I was like a protective lioness, every muscle tense as I stared down this threat. But instead of getting angry, Michael looked sad? Grace, don't be so hostile. I know I wronged you back then, but there were reasons. Do you have time to talk? We should clear up some misunderstandings after all these years. Misunderstandings? What misunderstandings could there possibly be? I silently laughed. Did he think I was still the lovesick fool who'd fall for his cheap manipulation? If you have something to say it here. I'm busy and don't have time for your soap opera drama. Michael sighed and began spinning his tale of victimhood. If I hadn't broken up with you, Jennifer would have made your life hell. Her family forced me to marry her, and they've been using our daughter to control me ever since. I only wanted to protect you from getting hurt. I planned to leave Jennifer once I was established and come find you, but I never got the chance. I'm relieved to see you're doing well and that our son got into Harvard. Knowing you're happy puts my mind at ease. He pulled out a bank card and handed it to me. I know I've wronged you. This card has $50,000. It's not much, but it's some compensation for what you and our son have endured. I've been transferred back here now. If you ever need help with anything, just ask. For you and our son, I'll do whatever I can. With that dramatic speech, Michael turned and left, like some tragic hero. I stood there holding the $50,000 card. Disgusted. $50,000. Hilarious. I spent more than that on Ethan's monthly allowance. I was the richest woman in the state, and he thought this pathetic amount would impress me? You see, after being abandoned, I became incredibly wealthy. Well, technically, it was my parents' money. Michael could never have imagined that by abandoning me for his career, he'd actually freed me to inherit my family's entire fortune. The story goes back to when I was young and stupid. My rebellious romantic choices had disappointed my parents so much that they'd written me off as their heir. That honor was supposed to go to my older brother. But fate intervened. My brother died in a car accident during a business trip, leaving behind 2 children. That's when my parents, facing their own mortality, brought me home pregnant and heartbroken as their only remaining child. Suddenly aware of everything I'd thrown away for Michael, I threw myself into learning the family business. After Ethan was born, I started working alongside my father. The only condition for inheriting the company was that I had to legally adopt my brother's daughter, Emma. I agreed without hesitation. From then on, I managed the company while raising both children. Both kids turned out amazing. Ethan was a mathematical genius, headed to Harvard, and destined to take over the family business. Emma had no interest in business. She studied law, passed the bar, and got recruited by the Attorney General's office. Life hadn't been easy, but it had been rewarding because both children made me proud and never caused trouble. A few days after my encounter with Michael, I was sitting on my couch, distracted and worried about how his presence might affect my children. I heard someone at the door and looked up, expecting Ethan. Instead, it was Emma. Why are you here? I was surprised. Emma worked in the state capitol and rarely had time to visit, even during holidays. I immediately got up to ask if she'd eaten and offered to make her something, but she stopped me. I'm here on business and only have a few minutes. We'll have a proper family dinner when I'm done with this case. Oh boy. Someone was about to have a very bad day when Emma was involved in a case. I nodded and asked about her work and life. Without meaning to, I sighed several times, which caught her attention. Mom, you seem upset. Did Ethan cause trouble at school? I'd never been good at hiding my feelings, especially from my children. Emma was incredibly perceptive. She always noticed things others missed. After thinking it over, I decided to tell her about my recent troubles. She was naturally shocked. Besides, my parents, no one else knew about my past. I'd always tried to maintain the image of a strong, successful mother. I'd certainly never planned to tell my children about those dark chapters of my life. I gave her a brief overview of my history with Michael and the recent incidents. Mom, what did you say this man's name was? Michael Harrison. Just mentioning his name made me roll my eyes. Emma suddenly went quiet, as if thinking deeply about something. Mom, are you sure he really gave you $50,000? Could I hold on to that card for you? I found the card and handed it to her. She gave me some instructions and then hurried off after making a phone call. I was curious about why Emma wanted the card, but $50,000 wasn't significant money to me, so I didn't ask. Michael didn't contact me for several weeks. Just when I thought the $50,000 was hush money and he'd leave us alone, he called. He wanted to meet for dinner the next evening at an upscale hotel downtown and insisted I come. I didn't know what he was planning, but I was afraid he might bother Ethan, so I agreed. Michael had reserved a VIP private dining room. When I arrived, he was alone. He looked somewhat haggard. When he saw me, his eyes lit up, and he quickly stood to offer me a seat. I found his behavior suspicious and got straight to the point. "Nice place. What game are you playing now? What are you talking about? Despite everything, we had years together. Why would you think I'm playing games?" Michael put on his fake concerned expression, sitting across from me with a self-pitying look. "Grace, why won't you believe me? I genuinely want to make things right. I feel terrible about you raising our son alone all these years. Seeing that you're doing well puts my mind at ease. Just say what you want." I wasn't buying his act. I didn't believe he'd brought me here just to reminisce. My directness clearly made him uncomfortable. "Some investigators have been sent down from the state level recently. The situation is complicated, but I heard you're related to prosecutor Emma Chen. For old time's sake, considering that $50,000, could you maybe arrange a meeting between us?" Michael rubbed his hands together, looking at me with desperate hope. It was impressive that he'd managed to discover Emma's connection to me. Looking at his pathetic expression, I couldn't hide my amusement. "How much are you offering? Name your price. I'll pay for Ethan's entire college education, even graduate school or studying abroad if he wants." Seeing my smile, Michael seemed to think he had a chance. That's when I realized why Emma had gone quiet upon hearing Michael's name and why she'd wanted that bank card. "How much can you offer?" I asked, maintaining my smile. My question seemed to relieve him. He held up one finger. "10,000? 100,000. He looked at me like I'd never seen so much money in my life, then continued arrogantly, "Once I accomplish what I need to do, 100,000 will be nothing. I'll give you 50,000 every year after that, plus all of Ethan's educational expenses. I have a condo downtown. I'll give you the keys soon. And I promise that when Ethan gets married, I'll buy him a penthouse in the best part of the city." These were tempting offers. Too bad he'd picked the wrong person to bribe. All the conditions he'd offered were pocket change to me. I didn't have the heart to tell him that I'd already put 10 properties in the city's most expensive districts under Ethan's name when he turned 18, along with several commercial properties. The annual rental income alone was several times what Michael was offering, not to mention Ethan's 10% stake in the family company that my parents had left specifically for him. Ethan didn't need money. Neither did I. I started laughing. Just as I was about to mock him, the private dining room door burst open. "Well, Michael Harrison. I wondered why you'd been sneaking around lately. Turns out, you're keeping a mistress." A woman stormed in, pointing an accusing finger at Michael. "If I hadn't been having dinner with friends and someone mentioned seeing you here, I'd still be in the dark. Giving money and promising apartments, you're quite generous." I recognized her. Jennifer Liu, Michael's wife from his civil service prep class. Even after all these years, I remembered her. Jennifer was ready for a full-scale confrontation. When Michael didn't respond, she turned on me. "You homewrecker! How dare you seduce my husband?" She raised her hand to slap me, but I caught her wrist and pushed her away. I stared at her emotionlessly, suddenly understanding that Michael had been involved with Jennifer even back when we were together. When her slap missed, Jennifer finally got a good look at me. Her mouth fell open in shock as she recognized me. "It's you! So you two are rekindling your old romance." I swear I didn't say a word. Now I understood where Bella had inherited her dramatic tendencies. Jennifer crossed her arms and sneered at me. "You're really something, carrying his baby all these years in silence. Waiting for your moment to strike, weren't you? Planning to use the kid to worm your way into our family? Well, I've got news for you. It's never going to happen. If you know what's good for you, you'll stay away. I could destroy you and your little bastard with a snap of my fingers, you. I slapped her before she could finish. Watch your mouth. Who are you calling a bastard? I'd used considerable force in that slap. You can insult me, but not my son. And honestly, that slap was me being restrained. Ah! Jennifer screamed, stunned by the hit. She scrambled up from the floor and lunged at me. You bitch, you're finished. Do you know who my father is? I'll destroy you and your son. Jennifer tried to attack me, but Michael grabbed her around the waist. This only made her angrier, and she turned her fury on him. The two of them started fighting each other. Michael tried to explain, but Jennifer slapped him, which finally set him off. I sat back and watched this domestic drama unfold until Michael had enough and slapped Jennifer back. The sharp sound silenced the entire room. Can you stop being so unreasonable? Are you trying to destroy me? Jennifer, struck and trembling, tearfully demanded to know how he could hit her. The whole scene was worthy of a soap opera. I'd had enough entertainment for one evening. I stood up, clapped my hands, and said genuinely, I was wondering which parent Bella inherited her genes from. Now I understand completely. I looked at the disheveled, scratched-up Michael and crossed my arms smugly. Michael, after all these years in politics, didn't you think to choose a more private location for a sensitive conversation? What do you think would happen if I gave today's security footage to the ethics committee? I pointed to the surveillance camera in the corner, my meaning crystal clear. But Michael just laughed dismissively. Grace, are you threatening me? Do you know what kind of place this is? If I hadn't invited you here, you'd never have been able to afford to set foot in this establishment. If you can get that footage, I'll eat my words. You probably don't even know the owner's last name. Actually, I do. I cut off his gloating. The owner's last name is Chen. Grace Chen's Chen. What a coincidence. I owned this hotel. As his mocking laughter died, I called the hotel manager. The manager hurried in and bowed respectfully, asking how he could assist me. Michael's face went white with terror as I pointed to the surveillance camera. Pull up all the footage from this room tonight, along with a record of this gentleman's entire spending history here. I stared coldly at the now panicked Michael. Mr. Harrison, I don't think I'll need to arrange a private meeting between you and my daughter after all. Very soon, she'll be coming to see you directly. Michael Harrison, you're finished. Michael was arrested. I handed all the evidence to Emma, and it turned out that her business trip was specifically to investigate Michael and his father-in-law's embezzlement scheme involving construction material purchases. Originally, they'd been very careful and left no traces, but Michael's $50,000 payment to me had been their undoing. The VIP room he'd booked at my hotel became the final nail in his coffin. My hotel was indeed upscale, and VIP membership required significant spending, the kind of money that couldn't be explained by a civil servant's salary. Michael's downfall exposed his father-in-law and an entire network of corruption. According to reports, they'd embezzled substantial amounts over the years. Even the lightest sentence would be 30 to 40 years in prison. Watching Michael face the consequences of his actions felt incredibly satisfying. All the resentment I'd carried for years finally evaporated. After much consideration, I decided to tell Ethan everything about our past and about his biological father. Some truths needed to be told. I already knew, Ethan said, his casual response catching me off guard. Don't worry, I'll never become a hopeless romantic like you were. Besides, Sophia is worth loving. We've made a pact to attend college together, then graduate school together, and get married after we finish our master's degrees. Mom, did it hurt a lot when you gave birth to me? If it was really painful, maybe Sophia and I should just adopt instead of having biological children. What do you think? This kid. Fine, I said, watching my son talk about his future with such tender consideration. 2 tears rolled down my cheeks. Damn it, I hadn't escaped after all. He'd inherited the romantic gene after all. The end. Author's note. Sometimes the people who abandon us do us the greatest favor. Grace's story shows that being discarded by someone unworthy can lead to discovering your own worth and building a life far better than anything they could have offered. And sometimes, the next generation learns to love better than we did.